This month of June, we're talking about things like anxiety and anger and pain and suffering, depression, doubts, questions. Yeah, the whole month. Who's excited? Who's? Okay, of course you're excited. Okay. So it's a series in Lamentations. And I know that you don't know what Lamentations is about, and that's fine. It's okay. Because who's reading Lamentations? Lamentations is, let me tell you a little refresher. It's poetry. It's 5 chapters. It's poetry, so it's full of symbols and imagery and metaphors all over the place. Okay, and the reason why you probably don't know much about Lamentations is because if you're not angry or depressed or suffering or in pain, then read Lamentations, and you'll get there, I promise. It will put you in that place. Lamentations is about what happened to Jerusalem. So very, very quickly, Saul, David, and Solomon are kings, and then around 950 BC until 586 BC, Israel is largely not doing a good job. They're largely disobeying God, not following him. They have a couple moments where things are good, but by and large, they're not doing too well. And so God is sending prophet after prophet after prophet saying, hey, turn away from the things that you're doing and turn back to me. So what does that look like for them? Lots of idolatry, lots of alliances with foreign countries that they shouldn't be doing, lots of injustices amongst their own people, okay, that type of stuff, right? And so God's saying, no, and prophets come, get away, get that stuff out of here, turn back to God and worship him. Well, they largely, again, they don't. So 365 years later, okay, from 950 to 586, 365 years, God is kind of patient with them and sending prophets and telling them this. He finally brings judgment to them by way of Babylon. 586, Babylon comes in to Israel, to Jerusalem, and just destroys it, ransacks the temple, burns it to the ground, turns places upside down. Obviously, people die. Okay, it's not good. It's devastation to the people of Israel because life as they knew it at that moment continued to cease, to be no more. And so literally the people that lived from all of that, they are going off into what's called exile. Okay, they're going to Babylon. To exile, and as they're walking to exile, they're looking back over their shoulder to Jerusalem, and literally it's going up in smoke. Okay, this is a big, big deal for the people of Israel, right? And so Lamentations then is written from the pit of those ashes. And so that is why it is a book that is just intense. It is a book that is just filled with this like grisly, ugly, dark imagery, symbolism, language. All right, fire it up. Let's get people. I can tell they're excited. Lamentations 3. Let's see if we can make some people sad and depressed. Okay, I am the man who has seen affliction by the rod of the Lord's wrath. He has driven me away, and he's made me walk in darkness rather than light. Indeed, he has turned his hand against me again and again all day long. He has made my skin and my flesh grow old. He's broken my bones. He's besieged me, surrounded me with bitterness and hardships. He's made me dwell in darkness like those long dead. He walled me in. I can't escape. He's weighed me down with chains. Even when I call out and cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. This is just a sampling just to, get you excited this morning. Okay, and the whole book goes on like this. It's all over the place. Okay, now when I read that, I start to get a little uncomfortable. Because a part of me is like, if you want to say one time, like, hey, God, you did this, okay, fine. But then can we just talk about how bad Babylon is, not how bad God is, right? Right? It starts to make me a little uncomfortable, but reminder that I think is good for all of us, and I believe this. The truth is we do become very comfortable with this book in ways. And I think it's good when we read it and we start to get a little uncomfortable with it again, in the right ways, uncomfortable with it in the right ways. And that's where I find myself reading through Lamentations, getting a little bit uncomfortable with it, okay? But if we think that we have to come to God, or that we can only come to God with prayers that are like pretty good, like with lives that are like sort of put together, we kind of have our act all like ironed out pretty well, then clearly we have not spent much time reading the Bible. The Bible gives us permission. The Bible gives us language, right, to the prison of pain that we are feeling. And I'm going to use that metaphor of prison all morning long to talk about the pain, the struggle, the sorrow, the grief, the agony that we are in at times. The Bible gives permission in language to the prison of pain that we are feeling. And we're all in prison of pains at different times in different ways, right? It's not a matter of, are you going to find yourself in pain and suffering? It's just a matter of how bad is it? Is it not so bad, or is it really, really bad? And maybe how long does it go on for? Is it for a short time, or is it for a long, long time that turns into depression and all that? My wife and I, had a call last week from someone that just said, hey, I just took a shower today for the first time this week. Okay, that's this prison of pain that carries on. We call that depression. The Bible is full of people that express, that cry out to God and become examples to us that we can do that too. Give us permission to be honest and raw and real with God, and give us language to do that when sometimes we have no idea what to say, right? There's people like David and Moses and Elijah. These people, they hit such rock bottom in their pain that they were suicidal, asked God to take their lives. There's people like Job that got to a place where his prison of pain, if you know his story, was so devastating. He's like, I wish I wasn't even born. There's people like Hannah, who was barren, could not have children, and was weeping and grieving that, which is a grief at any time in history, right? In the ancient world, to not be able to bear children even had some different levels and circumstances to it that made it even harder in some ways, okay? Obviously, all pain regardless. Hannah is crying out to God, like, can I please have a child? And God hears her prayers and gives her a child. She names him Samuel, which means because I asked the Lord for him. One of our hardest times of pain, prisons of pain, that we were in, especially for my wife, is the loss of pregnancy. So we have one child, and around Hayden, there's 4 other pregnancies that are lost. So there's one loss, and then Hayden, and then 3 more losses. Then she becomes pregnant for the 6th time. The doctor says, I'm sorry. It looks like you're losing this child as well. And she is grieving, right? She is in agony. I mean, because she just feels like, I can't, like it's enough. She's living on a diet of tears. Anybody been there? Diet of tears. It's a rough way to go. And she's crying out to God and pleading, please, can you spare me this? And I can't tell you why. I don't have answers. I don't know. All I know is that, he pushed through, he made it, and he's born. And she found permission in language, in solidarity with Hannah, and said, we need to name him Samuel. This is what the Bible allows us to do. Now, I want to ask you a question, right? Very simple. What prison of pain are you in right now? And maybe at this moment you're like, nothing really. And that's fine. What prison of pain are you in right now? Maybe for some of you, it's like your job, and you're thankful for the job, but it's like, you know what? The truth is, I really want to get out of there because it's not a good environment. It's just there's so many things that are messed up about I don't like being there. I really want to leave, but I can't leave because I really need the job and all these other circumstances. I can't just walk away from it. So I want to get out, but I also can't leave. So it's like I'm in a prison. It feels that way. I'm stuck. And it's hard, and it's a struggle, and it's just painful. And maybe it's really sorrowful for you. Maybe for some of you, you have a chronic pain, like literally like you've just had illness, pain, ailments for years or your whole life. And it is chronic, and it absolutely is a prison of pain that you live with every day, right? For some, obviously, maybe it's an addiction that is just a prison of pain that has a hold of you right now. For others, maybe it's the child thing like we already talked about, right? Maybe it's not being able to have a child is an absolute prison of pain for some of you. Maybe having the child don't laugh yet, I'm serious. It is the prison of pain. The house that you live in, that's like the safe space, the comfortable space, the kick off your shoes and let's all settle in space becomes a prison when that child is there. For some of you, your marriage is a prison of pain right now. I know for me, one of our hardest, painful times of struggle was in our marriage as we're working through and pressing through and trying to work through issues and grow from this pain that we're in. And it's a hard place to be in, and you're doing counseling week after week, month after month, and it goes on, and it feels like a prison at times. And one minute I'm mowing the lawn, the next minute I'm in tears. It's you're grieving this. And you're like, God, how do we get through this? And we're at a good place, and I have a good marriage and all that, but I know for some of you right now, you're in that space, and your marriage it feels like a prison, and you want it to get better, and you want it to go there. And here's the thing. In our prison of pain, whatever it may be, that has a way, right, of stripping us down. This is the thing with hardships and pain and struggles. It strips us. It like reveals who you are. You shed all the layers. You're as raw can be. And it hurts, obviously, hence the pain, all of that. But you're just kind of ripped down. And then you have like a choice to make. Like, am I just gonna like crumble here in this place of vulnerability and just being revealed for who I am and stripped down and raw and naked? Or am I somehow gonna grow from this? Am I gonna find some way to be strengthened from this? And I just wanna say to you that in your prison of pain, let it strengthen you. Because I think there is something to when we are bare, when we take all the stuff off, right? All the facades, the whatever, and we're just raw and stripped down. That is a place where God can do great work. That is a place where God can give you strength and help grow you and lift you up from that pit that you're in, from that prison that you're in. Let it strengthen you. So, let's look at the next slide. In Romans, Paul talks about this. He says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. And perseverance then produces character. Do you see where the strength is at work here? And character then, that produces hope. And hope doesn't put you to shame, like it doesn't mock you. No, this is real hope because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So Paul says, hey, the road to glory, right, is not an easy road. The road to glory that you're on is a road with twists and turns and like ups and downs, peaks and valleys. It's like being on some like roller coaster ride where it's just like at times it's just like, banging your head in the thing. And then like you're doing, full loops and you're up and you're down and you're all over the place. And that's what life feels like at times, right? The suffering that we go through. But it says that suffering, this road to suffering, it can strengthen us, right? It brings perseverance, and perseverance, character that makes you more of the man and the woman that God wants you to be. And when we are stripped down, raw in our pain, God can do something in us to strengthen us and make us more like him. Prison in the ancient world was an awful place. Nobody would want to be there. Prison in the ancient world, first of all, you would only go there, you'd only be sent to prison if you created like horrendous crimes, okay? So it's not exactly the same as today. So you had to do something major, against, whatever, in order to go there. When you find yourself there, you're in a place where, it's a dirt floor, it's a very unsafe place. The guards could torture you anytime with no notice. People were executed on a whim. People, because of all of this, suicide was a very common thing. In ancient prison, you didn't know if tomorrow, am I going to be let go and be free, or am I going to be executed? It's just, who knows? It's just whatever maybe they decide to do. So it was an extremely dangerous, hostile, volatile place. Where you didn't want to be. And Paul, the Apostle Paul in the Bible, we know that he spent multiple times in prison. Multiple times in prison. So I started asking myself, what did he do when he was in prison? Did he allow prison to be a space that strengthened him, or did it just kind of tear him down and eat him up, spit him out? And not only does Paul allow his literal prison experience of pain to be something that strengthens him, he actually even strengthens other people while he's there. So we have these books in the Bible. Some of them, they're called prison epistles, okay? Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon. They're called prison epistles because Paul wrote them when he was like a room full of scholars. Yeah, he wrote them when he was in prison. That's it. That's the whole shebang. So he's sitting in prison, making good use of his time, right? Writing the Bible that we can now sit and read today, so there's something to say about that. But when he's there, he says things like this. He says things like, for me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. When does he say that? Philippians, when he's in prison. But think about this. Prison in the ancient world, you didn't know. Tomorrow, I may be let free. Tomorrow, I may be executed. For me, to live is Christ, to die is gain. A couple chapters later, he says, I've learned the secret of contentment. Wow, where'd you learn the secret of contentment, Paul? In prison. Philippians, in prison. I've learned the secret of contentment. It was a place that strengthened him. It was a place where he would look for, how can I strengthen other people? So, hey, I'm going to send Onesimus back to you. When I send him back to you, you need to forgive him. You guys need to kiss and make up. I know it's been a rough go, but you really need to work this out and take care of each other. That's Philemon, right? He wrote that in prison, thinking of other people and how he could actually build up and strengthen them. Right, in prison, he writes, I want you to grow in humility and gentleness and make every effort, get this, to keep the unity of the bond of peace amongst yourselves. So in prison, he's maybe looking at his shackles that form bonds, chains around him that says, man, this is Ephesians. Man, I want you guys be humble, be gentle, and man, make every effort to keep the bond of peace that is so strong that unites you together in the Spirit of God, just like these chains on me that I cannot break. That's Ephesians. That's when he's in prison. Is prison a place, the prison of pain that we're in, a place that you are doing everything you can to allow it to strengthen you and shape you, to forge your character like we read about in Romans? And what does all this lead to? It leads to hope, right? He says this strength, and it gives you perseverance that brings about this character that leads to hope, And the last thing that I just want to leave you with is, in your prison, always remember tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day of hope. Tomorrow is the day that we don't want to think about, that we can't think about, that we can't even have sight of when we're in our prison of pain. We're often self-absorbed. We're just in our own hole. We're fixated right here, and we can't see beyond, right, the walls that imprison us. So remembering tomorrow becomes essential. So, good news. The one bright hope in Lamentations. There it is. Now stick with me, because it starts out bad, but it gets good. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness, the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast in me, right? So, okay, we got all that. We've been talking about that all morning. But look at this. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions, they never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him. And if you go on reading the rest of the chapter, by the way, over and over, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait. Just what we all love to do. Now, what is this hope that he's talking about? Is this just like, man, I remember my afflictions, I know my sufferings, but God, you're good, and like I know you're loving, and so I'm just kind of wishing on a star that you kind of pull through for me in the end. Like, it's way better than that. So what he's actually recalling to mind is God's promise, his covenant to David. So years earlier, God makes this covenant with David. And here's what he says. Put this up there. We read again in Psalms. This is what Lamentations, I think, is calling to mind with what he just said. He's recalling this to mind. Look what it says. I will maintain my love to him forever, and my covenant with him will never fail. Again, talking about David. I will establish his line forever, his throne as long as the heavens endure. If his sons forsake my law and they don't follow my statutes, they violate my decrees, and fail to keep my commands, I'll punish their sin with a rod, their iniquity with flogging. Well, check. All that happened. Stage right, enter Babylon. Wipe them out. Okay, now, 33. But I will not take my love from him, nor will I ever betray my faithfulness. I will not violate my covenant or alter what my lips have uttered, which is that throne, the line of David, will endure forever. So in Lamentations, the writer is saying hope is born out of pain. Yes, we are absolutely afflicted. We are in suffering. We have been destroyed. But God also said in that same covenant that the line of David will endure forever, that his love will never end, that his faithfulness will be forever, right? He's calling upon real hope, knowing that just as God did this, God will also be faithful to do that. Does this make sense? I'll take that as a yes. Okay, come talk to me afterwards. Now, check this out. This is really cool. They go into exile, right? They go into exile. Place is destroyed. Babylon comes in, wipes them all. They go into exile. They're in exile for 70 years. That's how long that lasts, right? Waiting. Now, what do you think the people in exile, what do they do when they're in exile? Well, if you were like much older, I suppose you just died there, right? Your life ended in Babylon, in exile, game over for you, thanks for playing. Okay, other people, quite a bit younger, they grow up there, right? The rest of their lives maybe are just kind of spent there. They're growing up there. Other people, right, are born there, right? They're still having children. They're doing that. So you have kids that are born into exile in Babylon. Little Jewish boys, little Jewish girls. Hey, I'm an Israelite. And you're born in exile. And you have mom and dad and others just passing down the stories from generation to generation to generation. Hey, this is what God has done. This is who God is. Man, this is what God did when we were slaves in Egypt. He sent Moses, he freed us, and just the stories. And man, there was a time, I know you can't picture this. I know all you know is life in exile, but Bobby, they wouldn't have been named Bobby then, but Bobby, man, it was glorious back there. I mean, we lived in Jerusalem. I mean, there was the temple. We worshiped God. God met with us there. I mean, we had the land. I mean, all this land, it was fruitful and we had homes and flocks and herds, and life was amazing. Okay, so those stories, right, are passed down to them. Now, what did the people do? So there were two main responses that happened, okay? One response is the majority of the people, that group, they settled into Babylon. They said, this is our prison of pain. This is exile. This is it. We're not getting out of here. This is the end of the road. And they essentially gave up. They did not remember tomorrow. They did not remember anything that God said. They just gave up. They kind of threw in the towel and they said, you know what, we're just going to start worshiping the Babylon gods. Might as well. Our gods, I don't know, wherever, They start worshiping the Babylon gods. They start marrying the Babylon people. They start having Babylon children. They start making Babylon roots. They have Babylonian families. They get Babylon jobs. They just say, this is it. We're just going to sink down the roots and accept our prison that we're in and call it a day. That was one group. Then there was this other little group of people. 70 years later of exile, political powers change. New political powers say, yeah, if you guys want to go back to Jerusalem, you can go. I don't care. And this other group, 1/10 of the people that went into exile, 1/10 of them say, oh, no. We remember tomorrow. We're going back. We're going home. What are they going back to? Nothing. Right? This place went up in smoke, and it's been left untouched for 70 years. So even if you're like, hey, man, I've heard the stories that our house, didn't get burned down. Our fields never got touched. Well, what do you think your field's going to look like when it hasn't been touched for 70 years? Okay, let me tell you what my pool looks like when I don't touch it for 1 week. Imagine your pool for 70 years. Right? So yeah, you're going home. Maybe they didn't light your trellis on fire. Who cares? What do you think your trellis is going to look like, right? They're going home to nothing. But why? Why did they do it? Why did they do it? Why 1/10 of the people say, no, we're serious. Yes, we're going back. And they do. They go back. And it is exactly what we're talking about. And they just start clearing the rubble, and they start pulling out all the weeds, and they start doing whatever they need to do to their fields so they can start growing some crops again. And they literally from the ground up, they start rebuilding their lives, put new houses, they rebuild the temple. 1/10 of the people. Why? Because they remember tomorrow. They have hope. They know, no. God is faithful. God is true. He will do what he said, that this happened, but then this will happen. He will remember the line of David forever, and we remember that. We are not giving up on that promise. We are not losing hope. We are not calling it quits here in this prison of pain. We're not doing it. We're gonna keep fighting. And they go and they rebuild. 10 years goes by, 20 years, 100 years, hundreds of years. And what are they doing other than rebuilding and starting over. They are remembering tomorrow. Every day they wake up, oh, we remember. We know what's coming. We have hope. We believe. We know the promise. We know God's loving faithfulness endures forever. We remember tomorrow is coming. 500 or so years later, because of a tenth of the people, a little baby is born to Mr. and Mrs. Nobody Cares, mom and dad, in a little stable in Bethlehem. His name is called Jesus of Nazareth. And this Jesus grows up, and he does what nobody else has done. And one of Jesus's titles that he is often referred to is the Son of David. The Son of David because of that. He grows up, he lives his life, he gives his life, right? He rises again. And I've just got one verse for you on Jesus to take with you today. I have told you these things, Jesus says, right? And these things are, you're going to have trouble. I'm going to leave you. You're all going to run away scared and afraid, and things are going to go bad. So that in me you may have peace. Look at this. Here's your takeaway. In this world, you will have trouble. I mean, you will have pain. You will have suffering. The road to glory is no joke. So buckle up, right? You are going to be in pain, and you are going to be in agony, and you are going to grieve. And there are going to be times when you are living on a diet of tears. And you may even wish you were dead or had never been born. In this world, man, you will have trouble, but take heart. Take heart. Keep believing, right? Don't give up hope. Remember tomorrow. Remember it. Why? Because I have overcome the world. I've overcome it. And for all of you in Christ, in your prison of pain, in that place, you are already an overcomer because of him. Jesus has overcome, so in him we are already overcomers. You've already, you've made it. I know you're in the prison. I know you don't feel everything maybe we're talking about today, but that's okay. Sometimes we know why we feel what we feel. Sometimes we have no idea why we feel what we feel. Our feelings are not always or even close the best indicator of what is true anyway. But Jesus says, I've overcome. You're going to have trouble, but I've overcome. And in me, you are right now in your pain and sorrow and tears and grief and torture, whatever it is, your affliction, you are an overcomer. And so all around the room, we have communion stations, and I invite you to take this bread and this cup to remember Jesus' body and blood that was given for you. We are not taking this to mourn a death. We are proclaiming a death, and we are proclaiming the victory in and through his death. So take this, and be reminded today that in your prison of pain, whatever it is, whatever's going on, in Christ, you have victory already. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I've overcome the world. Take and eat this and remember that today.